Hi everyone, welcome to GM Orange's channel. In this video, I would like to show you guys the Sicilian Defense. In this part 1 video, we'll be dealing with the Sicilian Najdorf, the Sicilian Dragon, the Sicilian Scheveningen, and finally, the Classical Sicilian. The objective of this video is to give us some perspective about the options that black players can play and the way white can react to it. Let's get started. E4, C5, the Sicilian Defense. And if white wishes to go with the main lines, white usually continues with knight f3. And if black players wish to go with the Sicilian Najdorf or the dragon, black players should continue with d6. And with d4, the position becomes the open Sicilian. And after this exchange, we see the pawn structure that is pretty unique to the Sicilian pawn structure. The pawns on a2, b2, c2, 3 pawns on the queen side for white, and 4 pawns on the king side for white. Whereas black has 5 pawns on the king side and 2 pawns on the queen side. And after natural development, knight f6 and knight c3, here we come across an important moment. Black has a few options in this position, starting with a6. The Sicilian Najdorf. Sicilian Najdorf has been a favorite of Fischer as well as Kasparov, the two players who are widely considered as the greatest of all time. And during their prime years, they used the Sicilian Najdorf extensively and popularized it. I mean, they had such tremendous success. Even today, we see Sicilian Najdorf as one of the top level openings in every tournament played by best players of our time. Let's try to understand the Sicilian Najdorf to begin with. So once black commits a6, as in all the Sicilian variations, white has two approaches that he can always take. One is more of a positional approach, and the other one being certainly more aggressive. When we say positional approach, he can always start with bishop to e2 followed by short castle. To begin with, when you are an amateur player, I think almost all the coaches will teach you this approach because it's much more simpler and easier to play. But if you are more on the intermediate or a little more advanced level, you can certainly opt for more aggressive lines like the English attack with the idea of bishop e3, f3, queen d2 and long castle. Basically, the whole idea behind this formation is to get ready for the attack on the king side. But whether white goes with the positional approach with bishop e2, short castle, or bishop e3 followed by long castle sooner or later, it doesn't matter. White almost always goes with the attack on the king side. You can expect the pawns that's advancing on the king side, something like f4, g4, f5, g5, or sometimes f3, g4, h4, g5, h5. And white comes out with a heavy attack on the king side whenever they meet the Sicilian Najdorf. On the other hand, black players have two approaches. One is with e6, the other one is with e5. Typically, when white is fighting for the d5 square, either directly with bishop c4 or bishop g5, it doesn't matter. Black almost always replies that with e6 because it's important to keep the d5 square under control. With other moves like bishop e2 or bishop e3, black can have the option of going e5. But pretty much e5 is the structure. Here, the rising pawn structure is unique for the Sicilian Najdorf. But bottom line, one important point to remember is whenever black commits this e5 move, we can see this d5 square has become a potential weakness, a square weakness in this case, because black is left without any pawn to control the d5 square. But he has enough pieces like bishop to e6 some cases, or sometimes he can also prepare b5, bishop b7 to fight for the d5 square, and the other knight can also join in to control the d5 square. So black is left with the basically he has to defend the d5 square with only the pieces and not the pawns. So White players generally fight for the d5 square, like trying to trade off all the pieces that can fight for the d5 square, like bishop g5, and trying to reroute the knight to the d5 square. This is a common plan that you can expect whenever the pawn structure is fixed in this way in the Sicilian structures. So with Sicilian Najdorf, there are two approaches for both sides, and I think this is pretty clear. Let's move on to the Sicilian Dragon. And Sicilian Dragon, I think there is no introduction that is required for this variation. One of the most popular, one of the most feared openings in chess. Whenever Black brings out this bishop to g7, the g7 bishop, which is also called as the Dragon bishop, you can expect a lot of attack on the queen side. And white players almost always go with the bishop e3 f3 structure, which is also called as the Yugoslav attack. Like as I said regarding the Najdorf, against all the forms of Sicilian, white players can always go with bishop e2 short castle, which is a more solid or safer approach for the white players. Or if white players wish to go pretty aggressive, if you really like more aggressive attacking positions, then you should definitely go with the Yugoslav attack. And after these natural moves, there are two ways to continue in this position for white players mainly. One is bishop c4, the other one is long castle. But nevertheless, white players wish to continue with the attack on the king side with h4, g4, h5 with a clear expansion plan on the king side to break open black's king and directly look for a checkmate against the black king. On the other hand, black players will also be looking to bring in enough attack on the queen side with b5, a5 expansion on the queen side. First thing, he'll collect the bishop for the knight and try to expand and build in pressure on the queen side. And in many occasions, we always see a natural exchange sacrifice plan with rook takes c3 to shatter white's pawn structure on the queen side. And once that is done, certainly the bishop on g7 gains more strength. But nevertheless, the bishop on g7 is the most dangerous piece in this line, and white certainly wishes to trade it off at the right time, which will ease the pressure for the white side on the queen side. But bottom line, if you are going to play either the Sicilian Dragon with the white side or black side, what we should remember is in these kind of lines, in these kind of variations, timing becomes a very crucial factor. You need to have a long-term plan. You need to go with the plan. Each and every move should be contributing towards achieving that goal, the long-term goal. Because if white is able to launch the attack before black does, certainly white has an advantage. And the other way around too. If black is able to bring in pressure and against the white king, which is castled on the queen side, and if white is unable to bring in the pressure on the king side that way, certainly it becomes much more favorable for the black side. So don't waste any time with useless moves. Every move should be contributing towards the attack against the opponent's king. It's always like whoever is able to bring in the attack against the opponent's king, and if they are able to open up the lines to attack, they are definitely going to have an advantage in the Sicilian Dragon. And with this, we can move on to the Sicilian Scheveningen, which starts with e6. And Sicilian Scheveningen also, which it can be met with either a positional approach with bishop e2 short castle as always, or you can certainly go with the most aggressive and probably the best line against this Scheveningen, which is the Keres attack with g4. The Keres attack is considered as the most critical test, and which tries to immediately expand on the king side and build in pressure on the king side. The point is to expand and attack as quickly as possible without any delay. This is white's idea. And white, if he tries to, white will be certainly trying to achieve a pawn break like this. And if he manages to achieve this, I'm sure like black is going to be in big danger, because that's going to bring in a lot of pressure on the king side, which will shatter the pawn structure for black. The e6 pawn will certainly fall, and if e6 pawn falls, the d5 pawn also, the d5 square can also can be a potential weakness after that. And black certainly tries to create counter chances in the center with the d5 pawn break at the right time, or create some counter chances for himself on the queen side. But bottom line, this is where the battle takes place in the Sicilian Scheveningen. But because of the Scheveningen Keras attack, more or less we don't see the Scheveningen in the top level very often. It's played pretty. I mean, in the top level, it's always a rare guest these days. But during the 80s, Kasparov used it extensively. But later he also moved towards Sicilian Najdorf, and we didn't see any player who regularly adopted only Scheveningen in their repertoire. So with this, we can move on to the next line, that is the classical Sicilian with knight c6. And here, once again, the approach with bishop e2 short castle is certainly possible for the white players, which is solid and safe. But again, the best and critical test for white is to continue with bishop to g5, which is also called as the Rosser attack, with queen d2 followed by long castle. Once again, white wishes to continue with the attack on the king side, either with f3 or f4. Both the plans have been played extensively, with f4 probably the main line. Again, we see like all these Sicilian Najdorf structures, Najdorf variation, and Scheveningen, and also the classical Sicilian. They are like very close to one another, but they are still like they have their own unique ideas and plans as well. But one thing what we can expect is white coming out with an attack on the king side for sure, and black trying to create some counter chances for himself on the queen side or with a central pawn break. So this gives us some perspective about the Sicilian main lines, the Najdorf Dragon Scheveningen, and finally the classical Sicilian as well. In our next video, I'll be dealing with the Taiwanese, the Khan variation, the Sveshnikov, and other lines. So I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you then.